Hi, this is Dawn LM81,
And I'm Lady Envy, back from the dead.
welcome to the Fluff and the Fury Halloween special webisode.
Yep. Yay, webisode! We have something very special for you. Today we had an interview with Isis of Neferpineger, and she's talking about the history of Halloween and how the besom is in the and how it pertains to modern paganism with the besom. The besom also is the broom. And very informative video. I think you guys will really enjoy it. So that's what we're going to do first, and then after that we're going to have our making a besom video.
Yay!
Yay! It's a small besom, so it's not going to take a bajillion episodes. Like, what, last one? 5 episodes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, well, hope you guys enjoy her interview, and then we'll see you after the interview to make our besom. Yep.
We'll be back.
All right.
Hey, hi, I'm Lady Isis of Neferpineger. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Samhain lore and where it comes from, based upon both history and archaeological things that we have found. First of all, I want you to excuse my appearance. I have terminal cancer, but I'm doing this to show you that that shouldn't stop us from doing things at the end of our life, that as long as we've got air and breath, we should teach and continue to pass on our knowledge. So, anyways, here's to go. Most of us think of Samhain as Halloween, you know, with all the elaborate costumes, the trick-or-treating, and the things that we see, especially in modern America. Also, want to point out that America is probably the only country that I know of that still does trick-or-treating or celebrating Halloween in this manner. They don't do it except in one village in England, and they're quick to tell you that they don't do it. But we know, based upon archaeological evidence, that this is a Celtic tradition, that it does date back to the 5th century B.C., and we have found proof through writings of the Romans that conquered the area at the time, a little bit of what they would do. The Celts were a very diverse people. We know that they lived in Ireland and Scotland, England, and several countries along Europe, primarily France. They celebrated this as the end of their year. It was considered to be the end of summer, the last harvest, and their new year began on November the 1st. It would also be associated with the coming of the cold winter, and because of that, they saw it as the day of death, especially the death of humans. They believed that on this night, this day before the new year, that the veil between our world and the world of the dead was very thin. This allowed the presence and the walking about of spirits, and spirits were not always a good thing. Not as we think of, you know, Granddaddy coming to visit. They would be mischievous, they could be harmful, and so the Celts believed that certain things had to be done in order to protect yourself from them. For example, the Celts would, especially through the priests, the Druids, would have celebrations, and you would wear masks. You would keep your face covered at all times because the spirit might recognize you as someone they wanted to do mischievous acts against. They also thought that this was the best time for doing divination, and they had some very unusual ways, including acorns or walnuts. But they thought that at the time of the veil, they would be revealed things that ordinarily they would not have been able to see. To begin with, on the morning or at sunset on Samhain, every fire in every house would have been put out. Then they would go to the tops of sacred hills, especially in Ireland, and they would start what we call the big bale fire. This would be kept burning all night long. At the end of the celebration, on the morning of November the 1st, they would go and they would take an ember, and this ember was taken to each home, and the fire would be restarted from the sacred fire. They also, as much as we don't like to admit it, would do human sacrifices, not human, animal sacrifices, let's back that up. But no, we don't know definitively that they did human sacrifices in spite of the Green Man thing, or what is it, the Green Man? Wicker Man, that guy. I don't think they did that, but the Romans said that they did. The Romans have one line in one writing that came from Caesar, said Wicker Man, or we don't even want to go there. They did do animal sacrifices on this night. And we have found burned remains in archaeological pits, so we know that they did. Of course, they could have also been cooking them to eat them. And I prefer to think that it was a good roast as opposed to a good sacrifice. Well, yeah, a good beef roast. I mean, and that's what I think. But they did think that you had to hide your identity. That's where the idea of masks comes from. And let's face it, it's fun. You know, we like putting on a mask and becoming somebody that we're not on this night. And how many of us don't do it? I mean, I do. I put on lots of face. And I prefer face to a mask because a mask you can't breathe. But when it was over, then they would relight the thing. But there's a few traditions that have come through that you find most interesting, like the carving of pumpkins. That's not what they did originally. They carved a turnip. I mean, we're going to walk around with this little bitty turnip. But that's how they would carry the ember home. They would carve the little turnip, and they would put the ember, and then they would carry it home, and then they would start their fire from a little turnip. When people immigrated to America, turnips weren't that plentiful. So we use pumpkins. They're bigger. They make much better jack-o'-lanterns. You can really get elaborate with it. You can make some really cool faces. And so that's what we started to do over here. But we're going to take a minute. We're going to start to merge a little bit of the ancient traditions with what we see, beginning with the information I just gave you about the turnip. But another thing they brought over was the idea of trick-or-treating. And honestly, this is an ancient Celtic tradition, believe it or not, that they thought that the spirits did roam, and that if you didn't leave food outside and, you know, give the wandering spirits sustenance and something to do, then they're going to come in your house and they're going to get it anyway. So it was a much better idea to go ahead and leave these offerings outside. Later, it became a Christian idea, and they would come around. It's called All Souls Night, and they would ask, you know, give us some food, and if they didn't, and you were stingy, then expect to be vandalized. So there comes the tradition of trick-or-treating, and you don't give me something, I'm going to toilet paper your yard. But, get toilet paper. But I guess probably, ancient toilet paper. Oh my gosh, I wonder what that was consisted of. I don't even want to go there, because I bet it was pretty interesting. But let's talk about the one thing that everyone thinks of when you think of pagans, you think of witches, and it's probably the earliest wood cuttings are the besoms, the brooms. And it's really funny because there's not a lot of proof other until the advent of Christianity and you start to see these drawings. We don't have a lot of proof that these were used. But how many of us don't have one? This is my baby besom. It keeps me safe. It keeps the crap out of my house. But according to history, even though it is probably the first image that you see as a child, is this fat, and I always make this fat and ugly on the broom. Have you ever seen a pretty witch in a woodcutting riding on a broom? They're always ugly. Not always good. Put some clothes on woman, and they're always naked. But it's one of the first images we see as a child when we are shown the idea of a witch is this ugly crone riding on a broom. They have a cat behind her, but she should have put some clothes on. Undoubtedly, it was believed that this was the idea of the rulers of Europe, but the number of confessions that they got through various and sundry ugly ways, most of them said that they went to a Sabbath on horseback or walked. But witches of the legends fly go back to the beginning of the Common Era. The earliest known confession of a witch flying on a broom was in 1453, when Guillaume Adelin of Saint-Germain-en-Laye in France stated that he himself had done so.